When Clara finished digging that soil at 2 a.m, she had no idea she was unearthing the darkest secret of the most powerful Mafia family in New York. What seemed like the tragic end of 6-year-old Liam's life was only the beginning of something far more sinister. But what this broken woman, who had lost everything, her father, her mother, her dreams, and had been living in her car for 3 months, discovered about the Mafia boss's second wife would change everything forever. And you won't believe what this woman was truly capable of when her lies, her greed, and her blood-soaked past finally came to light. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. Drop a like if you're ready for this story, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the night that changed Clara's life forever. But to understand why Clara found herself inside the mansion of the most powerful Mafia family in New York on that fateful night, we have to turn back the clock 18 months earlier. Clara Bennett was 25 years old, a final-year medical student with a wide-open future ahead of her. She came from a small, loving family, a father who worked tirelessly in construction and a mother who devoted her life to her job as a nurse at the local hospital. They were never wealthy, but their life was filled with warmth and care. Then everything collapsed on one March afternoon. Clara was sitting in a lecture hall when a call came from an unfamiliar number. Her father had fallen from the 12th floor of a construction site, a faulty scaffold. He died before the ambulance arrived. Clara still remembered how she ran out of the lecture hall, her legs numb, the world around her fading as if someone had switched off all sound. When she reached the hospital, they showed her father's body lying on a gurney, covered with a white sheet. The construction company refused compensation, blaming her father for negligence. They had powerful lawyers. Clara and her mother had nothing. 3 months after her father's funeral, her mother began coughing up blood. Stage 3 lung cancer. The doctors said she had 1 year left, maybe less. Clara dropped out of school immediately. Her dream of becoming a doctor dissolved into thin air. She worked 3 jobs a day, waitressing in the morning, cashiering at a supermarket in the afternoon, washing dishes at a restaurant at night. Every dollar she earned went straight into her mother's medical bills, but the invoices kept piling up. Chemotherapy, radiation, pain medication, hospital rooms. Each day was a mountain of money Clara could not climb. She began borrowing. Credit cards, banks, then loan sharks. 14 months after her father's death, her mother took her last breath in Clara's arms. She held her daughter's hand tightly and whispered an apology for leaving her with such a burden. Clara cried until there were no tears left. She was 26 years old, orphaned, with nearly $200,000 of debt crushing her shoulders. The creditors began calling. Every day, every night. They threatened, they cursed, they said they would come find her. The small apartment her parents had left behind was seized to cover the debt. Clara stood on the sidewalk watching strangers carry her belongings out. The last memories of her family tossed away like trash. She had nowhere to go, no one to call. Clara lived in her father's old car through 3 winter months. On freezing nights, she curled up under a thin blanket, shivering until morning. She bathed in public restrooms. She ate whatever was cheapest she could afford. Some days nothing more than a loaf of bread and tap water. The waitressing job gave her a small income, until the restaurant manager began paying attention to her. He said she was beautiful. He said she would get a raise if she stayed after hours. When Clara refused, he shoved her into a kitchen corner, his hand forcing its way under her shirt. Clara pushed him off and ran. The next day she was fired. The official reason was a violation of company rules. The truth was that she had dared to say no. One late evening, as Clara walked back to her car after a side shift, 2 men emerged from a dark alley. They slammed her against a wall, searched her pockets, and took every dollar she had earned that week. One of them punched her in the face when she tried to resist. Clara lay on the cold sidewalk, blood at the corner of her mouth, watching their shadows disappear into the night. No one stopped to help her. 2 weeks later, Clara collapsed on the sidewalk in broad daylight. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a proper meal. People stepped around her as if she were nothing more than an obstacle. When she woke up, it was dark. She was still there, on the cold pavement, alone. No one had called an ambulance. No one had asked if she was all right. In a city of millions, Clara was completely invisible. That night, for the first time in her life, Clara thought about giving up. She sat in her car, staring into the darkness ahead, wondering what reason there was left to keep going. Her parents were gone. Her dream was dead. The future was a bottomless black hole. She cried until she fell asleep. But the next morning, when the first sunlight filtered through the car window, Clara opened her eyes. She was still breathing, and somewhere deep inside her, A tiny spark of hope refused to go out. She did not know that later that very day, she would see a job posting that would change her life forever and draw her into the dark world of New York's most powerful mafia family. Clara found the notice on a crumpled piece of heavy, expensive paper someone had thrown into a public trash bin outside a high-end private staffing agency. She had been searching for anything she could eat when her eyes accidentally caught the elegant, embossed text on the discarded flyer. Private estate staffing urgent. Confidential client. Live-in housekeeper wanted. Room and board provided. Monthly salary, $8,000. Strict NDA required. Clara read it again and again 3 times, convinced she must have misread it. $8,000 a month for housekeeping was unimaginable. That kind of pay was 4 times the normal rate. Something had to be wrong. But Clara had nothing left to lose. She called the number listed in the ad using her phone that was almost out of battery. The woman on the other end sounded cold and brief, asking her name, age, experience, then instructing her to come for an interview the next day at an address in suburban Long Island. Clara spent the entire night scrubbing the only outfit she still owned that looked remotely decent in a public restroom. She washed her hair with cold water, combed it with her fingers, trying to make herself look as little worn down as possible. The next morning she drove her battered old car for 2 hours, her heart pounding in fear that it would break down along the way. When Clara arrived, she understood why the salary was so high. This was not a house. This was a massive mansion set in the middle of vast grounds, surrounded by iron fences more than 3 meters high, with security cameras everywhere. The black iron gates opened after she gave her name through the intercom. The stone-paved driveway leading to the main building was so long that Clara had to drive another 2 minutes before reaching it. 2 men in black suits stood at the entrance, their eyes cold as ice, watching her from head to toe as if assessing a threat. Clara stepped out of the car with trembling legs. She had never seen wealth like this before. Marble statues, enormous fountains, rose gardens stretching endlessly. Everything was so perfect it felt unreal, as though she had stepped into another world. An older woman appeared at the front door. She had silver hair neatly pinned up, a stern face, yet her eyes held a warmth that was hard to define. This was Margaret Chen, the Antonelli family housekeeper for more than 30 years. She led Clara inside without a word. The interior of the mansion was even more overwhelming than the exterior. Polished marble floors, massive crystal chandeliers hanging from soaring ceilings, paintings on the walls that Clara guessed were worth more than her entire life put together. The scent of fresh flowers and rare wood lingered in the air. Margaret led her into a small room and began the interview. She asked about Clara's family, her past, her reason for wanting the job. Clara did not lie. She spoke of her parents' deaths, the enormous debt, the 3 months she had lived in her car. She did not cry, but her voice trembled when she spoke of the night she collapsed on the sidewalk and no one helped her. Margaret listened in silence, her eyes never leaving Clara's face. When Clara finished, Margaret asked only one question. "Are you afraid?" Clara did not understand. Afraid of what? Margaret did not answer, only studied her with an unreadable gaze. After a long silence, she stood up and said Clara was hired. Clara thought she had heard wrong. "What did you say?" "You are hired," Margaret repeated. "You will begin tomorrow. Your room has already been prepared. Personal belongings will be provided. You may park your car in the garage." Tears streamed down Clara's face before she could stop them. She thanked Margaret repeatedly, nearly falling to her knees in gratitude. But Margaret's expression did not change as she added one more sentence. "There are rules you must follow if you want to survive here." Clara did not understand why she used the word survive instead of work, but at that moment, she was too happy to care. She did not know that she had just stepped into the mansion of the Antonelli family, one of the most notorious mafia empires in the United States. She did not know that the owner of this house was Marcus Antonelli, a boss feared throughout the entire underworld. And she certainly did not know that behind this flawless luxury lay dark secrets capable of taking her life at any moment. On her first day working at the Antonelli mansion, Clara realized she had stepped into a world entirely unlike anything she had ever imagined. Margaret Chen led her on a tour of the estate, and with every step Clara felt more overwhelmed. The mansion had more than 40 rooms, 3 main floors, a basement that Margaret said she was never allowed to set foot in, 2 swimming pools, a tennis court, a small chapel, and a rose garden stretching out behind the house like a maze of red and white. Everything gleamed, flawless and so expensive that Clara was afraid to touch anything at all. Her room was located in the servants' wing, separated from the main building by a long corridor. The room was small but complete, with a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and a private bathroom. For Clara, who had lived in her car for 3 months, it felt like paradise. She sat down on the bed, touched the crisp white sheets, and nearly cried from happiness. But the joy did not last long. Margaret closed the door and looked at Clara with a seriousness that sent a chill through her. She said there were rules Clara had to carve into her mind if she wanted to continue living here. First, she was never to ask about the work of Mr. Marcus Antonelli. Never. No matter what she heard or saw, she was to pretend she knew nothing. Second, she was not to speak to anyone outside about what happened inside the mansion. Not family, not friends, no one. A single word shared could cost her more than her job. Third, she was never to enter restricted areas, including the basement, the boss's office, and the eastern storage wing. Fourth, if strange men came to see the boss, she was to disappear immediately, not look at their faces, not let them see hers. Clara listened with a dry, bitter throat. She wanted to ask why, to understand what was happening, but Margaret's gaze silenced her. Margaret added that the two maids before Clara had left. One had quit after 2 weeks because she could not bear the pressure. The other had disappeared one night, and no one knew where she had gone. Margaret did not say she was dead, but the way she paused made Clara understand there were things better left unknown. In the days that followed, Clara began to see that this was not a normal family. The men in black suits were not just guards. They carried guns hidden beneath their jackets, and their eyes watched constantly like hawks. Cars came and went at all hours, all luxury vehicles with darkened windows that revealed nothing inside. Sometimes Clara heard screams echoing up from the basement, muffled sounds as if someone were in unbearable pain. She pretended not to hear them, just as Margaret had instructed. One night, Clara accidentally passed by Marcus's office when the door was slightly open. She saw the Mafia boss sitting behind his desk, golden light casting shadows across his stone-cold face. In front of him knelt a man, blood dripping from his nose onto the marble floor. Clara heard Marcus's voice, low, slow, and more terrifying than any scream. He said that if it happened one more time, the man would no longer have knees to kneel on. Clara backed away, her heart pounding like a war drum, her legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. She returned to her room, locked the door, and curled up on the bed for the entire night. She wanted to run. She wanted to leave this place immediately, but then she thought of the $200,000 in debt. She thought of the nights starving in her car. She thought of collapsing on the sidewalk while no one stopped to help. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. This mansion, no matter how terrifying, was still the only chance she had. Clara decided to stay. She would follow every rule. She would pretend to be blind, pretend to be deaf, pretend to be mute. She would survive at any cost. But she did not know that fate had other plans for her. And within this house, there was a woman quietly weaving a dark scheme, one that Clara would soon become the sole witness to. 1 week after Clara began working, Margaret led her to meet the children of the family, explaining that aside from cleaning, her primary duty would be caring for Marcus Antonelli's 2 children. Sophia was 10, and Liam was 6, Marcus's children with his first wife, who had died 2 years earlier. Clara met Sophia first, in a vast study lined with bookshelves that reached all the way to the ceiling. The girl sat by the window, sunlight falling across her long black hair, yet her face remained dark as night. When Clara entered and greeted her, Sophia did not even look up, speaking only a single sentence, cold and distant. "You are the new maid, right? You will not stay long. The ones before you all left." Clara did not know how to respond. She looked into Sophia's eyes and saw a deep pain hidden behind that icy exterior. The eyes of a child who had lost too much, who had been abandoned too many times to dare trust anyone again. Clara wanted to hug her, to tell her everything would be all right, but she knew such words were meaningless to a child who had built walls around her heart. Then Clara met Liam, and everything was different. The 6-year-old boy, with curly brown hair and clear blue eyes, was playing alone in a huge toy room. When Clara entered, he looked up at her with curiosity and asked, "Who are you?" Clara smiled and knelt to his level, saying her name was Clara and that she would be staying to take care of him. Liam tilted his head, studied her for a moment, then suddenly stood up and ran to wrap his arms tightly around her. Clara froze, unprepared for such a reaction. He clung to her as if afraid she would disappear the moment he let go, asking in a tiny voice if she would stay, saying everyone always left, that his mother had left too, and that he did not want her to leave. Clara's heart felt as if it were being crushed. She held him close, stroked his hair, and whispered that she would stay, that she was not going anywhere. In that moment, Clara felt Liam's loneliness. A child growing up in a luxurious mansion, yet starved of affection. A child with the most powerful father in the city, who still longed for a warm embrace more than anything else. That afternoon, Clara met Serena Whitfield, Marcus's second wife. Serena entered the living room like a goddess stepping out of a fashion magazine, tall and slender, with golden hair like silk and flawless blue eyes, every detail perfect. The dress she wore was surely worth more than Clara's entire yearly salary. Serena smiled at Clara, a bright and friendly smile, saying she was happy to have new help, that the children needed care, that she hoped Clara would feel at home. Every word was right, every gesture perfect, yet something made Clara shiver. When Serena smiled, it did not reach her eyes. Those blue eyes were empty and cold, like a frozen lake in winter. And when Serena thought no one was watching, Clara saw her glance at Liam and Sophia with a completely different look, not the gaze of a loving stepmother, but the look of someone calculating, weighing, waiting for something. Clara looked away, telling herself she was imagining too much. Later that day, Clara saw Marcus Antonelli for the first time at close range. The 36-year-old Mafia boss was walking down the corridor with Viktor Petrov, his right-hand man. Marcus was tall and broad-shouldered, with slightly long black hair and sharp features carved like stone. But what stopped Clara's breath were his eyes, black, deep, and cold to the bone, the eyes of a man who had seen death too many times, who had caused death too many times, and no longer felt anything at all. Marcus did not look at Clara as he passed. To him, she was nothing more than an invisible shadow in his own house. Yet in that brief instant, as he moved by, Clara felt a power radiating from him, dense and suffocating, like the air before a storm. She held her breath until he disappeared behind a door, only then daring to breathe again. That night, Clara lay on her bed thinking about this strange family. A Mafia boss cold as ice, a second wife beautiful and perfect yet disturbingly false, and 2 children who had lost their mother, one girl who had sealed her heart shut, and one boy desperately starved for love. Clara did not know what kind of situation she had stepped into, but she knew one thing for certain. There were secrets in this house, and sooner or later, those secrets would come to light. The following weeks passed, and Clara gradually found her place within the Antonelli mansion. She woke up at 5 in the morning every day, prepared breakfast for the children, took them to school, cleaned the rooms, did the laundry, and handled hundreds of small unseen tasks. The work was exhausting, but Clara never complained. For the first time in many months, she had a roof over her head, regular meals, and a warm bed to sleep in each night. More importantly than anything else, she had Liam and Sophia. Liam clung to Clara like a shadow. Every morning when he woke up, he ran to her room before doing anything else, telling her about his dreams from the night before, about his favorite stuffed dinosaur, about the song he was learning. Clara listened to every word, and she realized this was what Liam lacked most. Not expensive toys, not a large bedroom, but someone who truly listened. Every night Liam had nightmares. He dreamed of his mother, dreamed of her disappearing into darkness, dreamed of calling out again and again with no one answering. Each time he woke in panic, he did not run to his father's room, did not call for Serena, but went straight to Clara's. He cried in her arms, trembling like a leaf in a winter wind. Clara held him, sang lullabies her own mother used to sing, and stayed with him until he fell asleep again. Some nights she slept sitting beside Liam's bed because he gripped her hand and refused to let go. Sophia was far more difficult. The girl remained cold and distant, still watching Clara with suspicion, as if waiting for her to leave like the others before her. Clara did not force anything. She simply stayed quietly present, bringing warm milk to Sophia's room each night, leaving small notes wishing her good night on her desk, and always being ready to listen whenever the girl needed. The turning point came on a stormy night, 3 weeks after Clara arrived. Thunder crashed outside the windows, wind howled like a demon's scream. Clara was checking on Liam when she heard a soft knock at the door. She opened it to find Sophia standing there, eyes red, lips pressed tight as if holding something back. The girl said nothing, only looked at Clara with a fragility that broke the heart. Clara did not ask questions. She simply stepped aside and let her in. Sophia sat on the bed in silence for a long time, then suddenly began to speak. She told Clara about her mother, Victoria Antonelli, the beautiful and gentle woman who had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. She spoke of how her mother used to sing to her every night, just as Clara now sang to Liam, of afternoons baking together in the enormous kitchen, of her mother's smile, her perfume, her laughter echoing through the halls. Then Sophia's voice broke. She told Clara about the day her mother died, how her father announced it coldly, as if speaking about the weather. No one held her. No one let her cry. A 10-year-old girl had to stand at her mother's funeral with a blank face because that was the rule of the Antonelli family. No weakness, no tears in front of outsiders. Clara listened, silent tears sliding down her cheeks. She understood Sophia's pain because she too had lost her mother, because she knew what it felt like to be forced to stay strong while breaking apart inside. That night, for the first time, Clara held Sophia and let her cry. The girl cried as she had never been allowed to cry in the past 2 years. The sobs she had suppressed for so long finally breaking free. Clara said nothing, only held her tightly and let her know she was not alone. From that night on, everything changed. Sophia began to seek Clara out, not as often as Liam, but enough for Clara to know that the wall was slowly coming down. She asked Clara about her mother, about her life before coming here, about the books Clara was reading. Small conversations, but meaningful ones, like threads slowly weaving them together. And Clara, for the first time in many years, felt needed. Not for money, not out of obligation, but because these 2 children truly needed her. Needed someone to listen, someone to stay, someone to remind them that they were not alone in this world. Clara remembered the days living in her car, the nights of hunger, the moments when she thought there was no reason left to go on. Now she had found that reason. Liam and Sophia, 2 motherless children in this cold mansion, had become her light, and she silently promised to protect them at any cost. She did not know that this promise would soon be tested in the most terrifying way imaginable. The closer Clara grew to the children, the more she began to notice strange things about Serena Whitfield. At first they were only small details, things she told herself she was overthinking. But over time those details piled up like pieces of a dark puzzle slowly taking shape. Serena always locked her bedroom door whenever she was alone. To most people that might seem normal, but in the Antonelli mansion, where security was tighter than a fortress, locking a private room was unnecessary. Clara noticed that every time she passed by Serena's room to clean, the click of the lock followed immediately. What was she hiding? Clara wondered, though she never dared to seek an answer. Then there were the secret phone calls. One afternoon, as Clara was cleaning the second-floor hallway, she heard Serena speaking inside her room. She was not speaking English. The voice carried a foreign language Clara did not recognize, something that sounded like Russian or another Eastern European tongue. Serena spoke quickly, her voice low and urgent, completely unlike the calm, graceful tone she presented to everyone else. When Clara accidentally dropped her cleaning cloth onto the floor, the small sound made Serena fall silent. The door opened, and Serena stood there, her eyes sharp and cold for a fleeting instant, before that perfect smile slid back into place. "Do you need something, Clara?" Serena asked, her voice sweet as honey while a trace of wariness still lingered in her eyes. Clara stammered an apology and hurried away, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she had seen something she was not meant to see, even if she did not yet understand what it was. But what troubled Clara most was the way Serena looked at the children. In front of Marcus and others, Serena always played the role of the perfect stepmother, hugging Liam, smoothing Sophia's hair, speaking words of affection with a radiant smile. Yet Clara noticed what no one else seemed to see. Whenever Serena thought no one was watching, the look in her eyes toward the children changed completely. There was no love there, no warmth, only a cold calculation, as if she were looking at obstacles to be removed rather than 2 children who needed care. Once, Clara caught Serena standing at the far end of the hallway, watching Liam play alone in the toy room. Her face held no expression, but there was something in her eyes that made Clara shudder. It was the gaze of a predator watching its prey, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then Sophia told Clara something that kept her awake for many nights. One evening, while Clara was reading to her, Sophia suddenly asked if Clara believed in ghosts. Clara was startled and asked why she would ask such a thing. Sophia was silent for a long moment, then said that many nights she woke up and saw Serena standing in her room. She did not speak, did not do anything. She just stood there in the darkness watching her sleep. The first time, Sophia thought she was dreaming, but it happened too many times for her to be mistaken. Each time Sophia pretended to sleep and peeked through half-closed eyes, she saw Serena standing beside the bed, her eyes glowing in the dark like a cat's, looking at her with something impossible to describe. "I am scared," Sophia whispered, gripping Clara's hand tightly. "I do not know what she wants, but I am scared." Clara held the girl close, trying to hide her own fear. She told Sophia that maybe Serena was just checking to see if she was sleeping well, but even as the words left her mouth, Clara did not believe them. No mother, not even a stepmother, would stand in the dark watching a child sleep with eyes like that. That was not care. That was stalking. From that night on, Clara watched Serena more carefully. She did not know who this woman truly was, or what she was planning, but Clara's instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. The 2 children she loved were living under the same roof as someone Clara was increasingly convinced was not normal. She wanted to tell someone, But who would believe a maid? Margaret Chen seemed to know more than she ever said, but she was not someone easy to confide in. Victor Petrov always looked at Clara with suspicion, and Marcus Antonelli, the terrifying mafia boss. How could she possibly go to him and say that his wife was dangerous? All Clara could do was watch in silence and pray that she was wrong. But deep inside, she knew she was not, and the darkness was slowly revealing itself. Marcus Antonelli was not a man who paid attention to the help. To a mafia boss, they were nothing more than invisible ghosts moving through the mansion, doing their work and disappearing again. He did not remember their names, did not remember their faces, and certainly did not care about their lives. But Clara Bennett was different. Marcus began to notice her when he realized the change in his 2 children. Liam no longer cried at night. The child who once woke up screaming from nightmares every evening now slept peacefully until morning. He smiled more, talked more, and no longer shrank away whenever an adult came near. Sophia changed even more noticeably. The girl who had been cold as ice, who never spoke unless spoken to, now sometimes let Marcus hear her laughter drifting from the study, a sound he had believed had died with Victoria 2 years earlier. Marcus began to observe Clara from a distance. He saw the way she knelt to Liam's eye level whenever she spoke to him, as if the boy were the most important person in the world. He saw the way she sat patiently beside Sophia for hours, saying nothing, simply being there until the girl was ready to open up. He saw the way she held the children with a sincere gentleness he rarely saw in anyone, including Serena, the wife he had married only because he thought the children needed a mother. There was something different about this woman. Marcus could not name it, but he felt it. She was not fearful like the other maids, did not lower her head and avoid his gaze when he passed, did not tremble when she accidentally encountered him in the hallway. In her brown eyes there was deep sorrow, but also a strange strength, the strength of someone who had been through hell and remained standing. One night, Marcus could not sleep. The tense negotiations with other mafia families left his mind restless. He went downstairs to pour himself a drink when he heard soft crying coming from the back garden. Marcus stepped outside and saw Clara sitting on the stone steps, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She was on the phone with someone, her voice choked and desperate. Marcus remained in the shadows, not intending to eavesdrop, yet not walking away. He heard Clara beg the person on the other end to give her more time. He heard her speak of a debt of nearly $200,000 that she was trying to pay off little by little. He heard her talk about her parents who were gone, about the days she had lived in her car, about the feeling of having no reason left to go on. Her voice trembled as she said she was doing everything she could, that she would pay it all back, if only they would stop threatening her. When the call ended, Clara sat there crying alone under the moonlight. She did not know someone was watching. She cried for her lost parents, cried for shattered dreams, cried for an unfair life that had pushed her to the edge. And Marcus stood there, for the first time in many years, feeling something stir inside his frozen chest. He had met countless people in his life, ruthless enemies, treacherous allies, wives and lovers who came to him for money and power. But he had never met anyone like Clara, a woman who had lost everything yet still gave her whole heart to loving 2 children who were not her own, a woman who carried an enormous burden on her shoulders, yet still smiled at Liam every morning, still sat patiently with Sophia every night. She could have given up long ago, she could have chosen an easier path, but she was still here, fighting, even when there was nothing left to fight for but herself. Marcus quietly went back inside, not letting Clara know he had been there. That night, he did not sleep, but not because of work. He thought about the woman crying alone in the garden, about the brown eyes filled with sorrow yet never weak, about the way she cared for his children with a love that even he, their own father, could not give them. For the first time since Victoria's death, Marcus felt that his heart was not completely empty, and that terrified him more than any enemy he had ever faced, because Marcus Antonelli knew that in his world, emotion was weakness, and weakness would kill him. That night, the Antonelli mansion sank into its usual silence. The clock struck 1 in the morning. Marcus was in his study, handling work. Serena had gone to her room at 10. Clara lay in her own room, eyes closed but unable to sleep, her thoughts spiraling endlessly around the weight of her debt. Sophia slept soundly in her bedroom, drifting through dreams untouched by the presence of a watchful stepmother. And Liam, the 6-year-old boy, was tossing restlessly in bed, his throat dry and aching. He woke, squinting into the darkness, his tongue bitter with thirst. Liam reached toward the nightstand for his glass of water, but it was empty. He did not want to disturb Clara at this hour. She had worked so hard all day. He decided to go to the kitchen himself. The boy slipped out of bed, small feet stepping onto the cold wooden floor. The hallway lay in darkness, guided only by weak moonlight filtering through the windows. Liam knew this house well. Every corner, every stair, and walking through the dark did not frighten him. What frightened him were the ghosts in his dreams. The memory of his mother disappearing, the loneliness of waking in the middle of the night. But now he had Clara. Thinking of her made him feel a little less afraid. He went down the stairs, small hand gripping the railing. As he neared the kitchen, Liam noticed a faint light spilling out from inside. Someone was in the kitchen at 1 a.m. Curious, he moved closer, stepping softly so as not to make a sound. Through the slightly open door, Liam saw Serena. His stepmother stood by the kitchen counter, her back to the door. She was doing something with a small bottle and a glass of milk. Liam tilted his head, trying to see more clearly. Serena opened the bottle, poured out several white pills, then used a spoon to crush them into a fine powder. Her hands moved with practiced ease, as if she had done this many times before. The white powder was mixed into the glass of milk, stirred until it dissolved completely, leaving no trace behind. Liam did not understand what Serena was doing, but his instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. He stepped back, and the wooden floor creaked softly in the quiet night. Serena froze. She turned sharply, and in that instant, Liam saw a face he did not recognize. Gone was the gentle stepmother with the sweet smile. This was the face of a stranger, cold and frightening, blue eyes suddenly sharp as blades. Liam, Serena said his name, her voice still sweet, but with something threatening beneath it. What are you doing here at this hour? Liam trembled, his instinct for survival shouting in his head. Run, run now. He turned to flee, but Serena was faster. She lunged like a panther, her hand closing around Liam's small arm before he could take a step. He screamed, but her other hand clamped over his mouth. Shh, Serena whispered into his ear, her voice sweet in a way that made the blood run cold. You do not want to wake everyone, do you? Liam struggled, tears streaming down his face. But a 6-year-old boy was no match for an adult. Serena dragged him into the kitchen, shut the door, and looked at him with calculating eyes. What did you see? She asked, her voice gentle while her eyes were ice cold. Liam shook his head violently, trying to say he had seen nothing, but his tear-filled eyes betrayed him. Serena sighed, as if regretting a minor inconvenience. You should have stayed asleep, she said. You should not have come down here. She glanced at the glass of milk on the counter, then back at Liam, and a strange smile curved her lips. But it is all right. Things will still go according to plan, just a little earlier than intended. Liam did not understand her words, but he knew he was in danger. He wanted to call Clara, to call his father, to call anyone at all, but Serena's hand still covered his mouth, and the darkness swallowed the silent plea of a 6-year-old child. In the elegant kitchen of the Antonelli mansion, under pale golden light, Liam's fate was being decided by the woman he called mother. Serena looked at Liam without the slightest emotion, as if the boy were nothing more than an annoying insect that needed to be dealt with. She pulled out a chair and forced Liam to sit, her hand still clamped tightly over his mouth. Liam trembled, tears soaking Serena's hand, but she did not care. Now you are going to be a good boy and drink this glass of milk, Serena said, her voice still sweet, as though coaxing a stubborn child. If you scream or try to run, Mommy will have to do something she does not want to do. Do you understand? Liam nodded frantically, his wide eyes filled with terror. Serena slowly removed her hand from his mouth, ready to clamp it back if he screamed, but Liam did not scream. He was too frightened to make a sound. I do not want to drink it, Liam whispered, his voice shaking. I want to go back to my room. I promise I will not tell anyone. Serena smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile at all. I know you will not tell, she replied, but you still have to drink. This is milk to help you sleep better. You will not have nightmares anymore. She held the glass of milk out in front of him. Liam stared at the pure white liquid, and every instinct in him screamed not to drink it, not under any circumstances. When he hesitated, Serena's hand tightened on his shoulder until it hurt. Drink. Her voice was no longer sweet, but sharp as steel. Trembling, Liam raised the glass to his lips. He thought of Clara, thought of Sophia, thought of his father. He wanted to call their names, wanted someone to come and save him, but the vast kitchen was silent, and no one knew he was there. He drank in small sips, tears falling into the milk. The sweetness could not mask the strange bitterness he tasted. When the glass was empty, Serena took it from him and set it on the counter, her eyes never leaving his face. Good boy, she said. Now sit here quietly with Mommy. Liam tried to stand and run, but his legs suddenly felt weak. The kitchen began to spin before his eyes. His eyelids grew heavy, as if someone were pulling them down. He tried to keep them open, tried to call Clara's name, but his tongue felt bound, producing only broken sounds. The world slowly faded into darkness. The last thing Liam saw before losing consciousness was Serena's face, her cold blue eyes looking down at him with a terrifying sense of satisfaction. When Liam was completely unconscious, Serena moved quickly and precisely, as if she had rehearsed this hundreds of times. She lifted the boy, surprised by how light his body was. She went out the back door and into the rose garden, drowned in darkness. Moonlight fell over the red and white roses, creating a scene both beautiful and eerie. Serena walked toward the far corner of the garden, where she had prepared everything days earlier. Beneath the loose soil lay a small wooden box, large enough to hold a 6-year-old child. She had dug the hole and placed the box there the previous week, using gardening as her cover so no one would suspect a thing. Serena placed Liam inside the box, arranging his small limbs neatly. She looked at his innocent face one last time, without a trace of regret in her eyes. To Serena, this was merely a task to be completed, an obstacle to be removed on the path to Marcus Antonelli's fortune. She closed the lid without nailing it shut, knowing the drug would keep the boy unconscious long enough. Then she shoveled the soil back in, one careful scoop at a time, gentle and precise, as if tending to the roses themselves. When she finished, Serena stood up and looked at the freshly smoothed earth. By morning, the soil would dry and look no different from the rest of the rose garden. No one would suspect a thing. She had already disabled the security cameras in this sector earlier that day, claiming the gardeners needed to do maintenance. The next morning, she would report Liam missing, a kidnapping gone wrong, or perhaps the boy had simply wandered off and fallen into the river. She would play the grieving mother perfectly, just as she had done before. And Serena, the grieving widow, would inherit the entire Antonelli empire. She had done this many times before, in France, in Italy, in Brazil, and she had never failed. Serena turned and walked away, leaving the 6-year-old boy alone in the darkness beneath the ground. She did not know that tonight, for the first time in her blood-soaked life, her perfect plan would be shattered by an unexpected maid. At the same time, in the small room in the servants' quarters, Clara still could not fall asleep. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning with cruel numbers. The debt was still there, enormous and crushing. The monthly salary she sent to pay it down was like a drop in the ocean, interest breeding more interest, and the threatening calls never stopped. That afternoon, the creditor had called again, saying that if she did not pay in full within 6 months, they would find a way to make her regret it. Clara did not know what they could possibly do to her while she was living in the mansion of a Mafia boss, yet the fear clung to her like a ghost that refused to let go. She thought of Liam and Sophia, the 2 children who had become her reason for waking up each morning. If she had to leave because of this debt, who would be there for them? Who would hold Liam when he woke from nightmares? Who would listen to Sophia when she needed someone to confide in? The thought sent a sharp pain through Clara's chest. The clock on the wall showed nearly 2 in the morning. The mansion lay in absolute silence, the kind of silence that existed only in houses that were too large and too empty. Clara closed her eyes, forcing herself to sleep because there was so much to do in the morning. But sleep would not come. The crushing weight of the $200,000 debt made the small room feel like a prison. Suffocating, Clara threw on a thin jacket and slipped out the back door to get some fresh air. She walked aimlessly toward the rose garden, hugging herself against the cold wind, tears silently falling for her hopeless future. She sat on a stone bench near the perimeter fence to calm down. Suddenly, she froze. A stray dog was scratching frantically at the ground in the far corner, whining softly. Clara stood up and walked over to shoo it away, but as she got closer, the dog ran off. But what it left behind made Clara freeze. The animal had dug a deep hole, frantically clawing away enough earth to expose the corner of a wooden lid, breaking the seal of the soil. It had created a small air tunnel leading straight down to the box. From that exposed gap, a sound escaped clearly into the night air. That was when she heard it. Not the wind, not an animal, but a faint, rhythmic thumping echoing directly from the exposed wood. Clara went to the window at the end of the corridor that overlooked the rose garden. Moonlight flooded the garden, turning the roses into shimmering silver shapes in the night. Everything looked peaceful and beautiful, yet something made Clara shiver. She looked more closely and noticed what was wrong. In the far corner of the rose garden, near the fence, there was a patch of ground that looked different from the rest. The soil there was darker, looser, as if it had been recently disturbed. Clara clearly remembered passing that spot the previous afternoon, while collecting fallen leaves. The ground then flat and dry. Now it was not. Then the sound came again, clearer this time, a faint, choking moan, like someone trying to call for help with no strength left, and it came from that disturbed patch of earth, from beneath the ground. Clara froze. It could not be. She told herself she was imagining things, that no one could be under the ground at 2 a.m, but the moan rose again, desperate and pained, and Clara's instincts screamed that she had to act immediately. She ran down the stairs, out the back door, and into the garden. The grass was wet with night dew beneath her feet. The cold air bit into her skin, but she did not care. She ran toward the suspicious patch of earth, her heart pounding like a war drum. When she reached it, Clara dropped to her knees and pressed her hands to the ground. The soil was soft and loose, completely unlike the surrounding earth. She put her ear down, and her heart nearly stopped when she heard the sound from below, faint tapping as if someone were knocking weakly against wood, a tiny, desperate moan, the sound of a child trapped in darkness, trying to call for help with the last strength remaining. Clara screamed, a cry of pure horror tearing through the quiet night. There was someone down there. Someone had been buried alive beneath the rose garden of the Antonelli mansion. Clara did not think anymore. She sprang to her feet and ran toward the nearby storage shed where she knew the gardening tools were kept, her hands shaking violently as she forced the door open and searched through the darkness until her fingers closed around the handle of a shovel, the metal icy in her palm, but she did not care. She ran back into the garden, dropped to her knees, and began to dig, shovelful after shovelful of earth flying into the night as Clara dug like a madwoman, sweat pouring down to mix with the tears streaming over her cheeks. She did not know what lay beneath, did not know if she was imagining things. She only knew that the moaning was real, and that she had to dig faster. The soil was soft, so the work was not difficult. Yet for Clara, every passing second was agony. Her shoulders burned, her back screamed, but she did not stop, the sound of the shovel striking the ground beating through the quiet night like a heart fighting to keep life alive. Then the shovel struck something hard. Wood. Clara threw the shovel aside and clawed at the dirt with her hands, her nails breaking, her skin tearing, blood seeping out though she felt no pain. She scraped away the soil until a wooden surface emerged. A box. A small wooden box large enough to hold a child. Clara's heart seemed to stop as she cleared the earth around it, searching for a way to open the lid. It was not nailed shut, only closed tight. She slipped her fingers into the gap and pulled with all her strength. The lid gave way with a creak, and Clara's world collapsed. Liam was inside. The 6-year-old boy with curly brown hair and clear blue eyes whom she loved like her own child. His face pale as if drained of blood, his lips tinged with blue, his eyes tightly shut, his small body lying motionless in the dark wooden box, coated with dirt and dust. Clara screamed, a sound that tore through the night in horror and pain. "No, no, no, Liam, my child." She reached into the box and lifted him out, his body cold in her arms, light as if life were already slipping away. Clara pressed her ear to his chest and heard it, a faint heartbeat, slow and barely there. He was alive but fading. "You are alive," she sobbed. "Hold on, my love. I am here now. I will not let you die." She leapt to her feet, clutching Liam to her chest. Her first instinct was to scream for the guards, but fear choked her throat. Serena walked freely in this house. What if the guards were hers? What if they handed Liam back to the monster? She couldn't trust anyone. She had to get him to the hospital herself. Clara ran toward the old service gate at the far end of the grounds, a blind spot she had noticed weeks ago, praying it was still unlocked. Her bare feet, striking gravel and wet grass without feeling pain. All she felt was Liam's cold body against hers, and the fragile breath fluttering near her ear. The streets were empty at 2 a.m, pale streetlights casting weak yellow pools along a long deserted road. Clara ran as she had never run before, bare feet slapping the frozen pavement, her lungs burning for air. Yet she did not stop. She could not stop. "Hold on, Liam," she whispered between ragged breaths. "Do not leave me. Do not leave Sophia. You are our light. You cannot die." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with sweat and dirt. She remembered the mornings Liam ran to hug her, the stories he told about his dreams, the smile he wore when she sang him to sleep. She could not lose him. She had lost her father, lost her mother, lost everything. She could not lose Liam. The main road was just beyond the service gate. Her legs burned, and Liam's weight felt like lead pulling her down. But she forced herself to keep moving. She burst onto the asphalt, gasping for air, just as headlights cut through the darkness. A delivery truck was approaching. She ran into its path, waving her arms desperately at a passing delivery truck. The driver, seeing a bloodied woman clutching a child, slammed on the brakes. "Hospital, please!" she screamed. The terrified driver didn't ask questions. He let them in and sped toward the emergency room. From exhaustion, but forced herself upright and burst through the emergency entrance. "Save him," she screamed, her voice hoarse from crying and running. "Someone buried him alive. Please save him. His name is Liam. Liam Antonelli. He is only 6 years old. Please save him." Doctors and nurses rushed forward, gently taking Liam from Clara's arms and placing him on a gurney, as voices shouted instructions and machines began to beep, and wheels clattered across the floor. Clara stood there, shaking, covered in dirt and blood, watching them rush Liam into the emergency room. She tried to follow, but her legs finally gave way. She collapsed onto the cold hospital floor, tears still falling as her lips moved in silent prayer for the child she loved more than her own life. Clara did not know how long she had been sitting on the hospital floor. A kind nurse brought her a thin blanket and a cup of warm water, but she could not bring herself to drink it. Her hands were still shaking, her eyes never leaving the emergency room doors where Liam was inside. She looked down at herself, her nightclothes smeared with dirt and blood, her bare feet swollen and covered with cuts, her fingernails broken and caked with mud. She looked like a mad woman who had clawed her way out of a grave, but she did not care. All she did was pray for Liam to live. Sudden noise erupted from the main lobby and made Clara lift her head. Marcus Antonelli stormed into the hospital like a force of nature. The Mafia boss was still wearing his work clothes, his shirt rumpled, his tie loosened, the face that was usually carved from ice now twisted with panic and rage. Viktor Petrov and 4 bodyguards followed close behind, every one of them taut with tension. Marcus scanned the waiting area and saw Clara. He rushed toward her, grabbed her shoulders and hauled her to her feet, his eyes blazing with barely restrained madness. "Where is my son?" Marcus roared, his voice shaking with the effort to contain himself. "What happened? Why is my son in the hospital?" Before Clara could answer, Serena appeared. She ran into the lobby with tears streaming down her face, hair loose and disheveled, a silk robe fluttering behind her, the perfect performance of a grieving stepmother. "Marcus," Serena sobbed, throwing herself into her husband's arms. "I heard and came immediately. Our Liam, our son. What happened to him?" Clara looked at Serena and felt sick. She knew who had buried Liam beneath the ground, but she had no proof, and in that moment she could not even open her mouth. She stood there trembling, watching Serena's performance with revulsion and helplessness. Marcus turned back to Clara, his deep black eyes filled with suspicion and pain. "Speak," he ordered. "Tell me what happened. Why were you the one who found my son?" Clara swallowed, her throat raw and dry. "I heard a sound," she said, her voice hoarse. "At 2 a.m, a moaning from the rose garden. I went outside to check and saw the ground had been disturbed. I dug and found Liam in a wooden box under the earth. He was still breathing, so I carried him here." Marcus stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You heard a sound at 2 a.m, he said slowly, "and you decided to go into the garden alone. Then you dug up the ground and found my son in a box." Clara nodded, knowing how insane it sounded, but it was the truth. Before Marcus could say anything more, the emergency room doors opened. A doctor stepped out, his expression serious but not hopeless. "Mr. Antonelli." Marcus spun around. "How is my son?" The doctor exhaled. "He is alive. He was given a large dose of sedatives and suffered severe oxygen deprivation from being buried underground. He was brought in just in time. Another 10 minutes and we would not have been able to save him." Clara broke down in sobs of relief. Serena cried as well, a hand over her mouth as if she could not bear the news. Marcus stood frozen, his face drained of color. "Sedatives," he repeated. "Someone gave my son sedatives and buried him alive." The doctor nodded. "We have notified the police. This is clearly an attempted murder. The child is currently in a coma but stable. We need to monitor him for the next few days." Marcus said nothing. He stood there, his broad shoulders suddenly looking as though they carried the weight of the world. Then he turned to Clara, his gaze filled with emotions she could not decipher. "You saved my son," he said, his voice low and unsteady. "But I still do not understand why you were the one who found him." Clara met the Mafia boss's eyes without flinching despite her fear. "I do not know who did this," she said, "but I will not let that person get away." From the corner of her eye, she saw Serena watching her with a cold stare hidden behind false tears, and Clara knew that the real battle was only just beginning. Serena did not let the moment slip away, and as soon as the doctor returned inside and Marcus was still lost in thought, she began planting the seeds of doubt, saying there was something very strange about all of this, her voice trembling as if she were struggling to hold herself together, And when Marcus turned to her and asked what she meant, she cast a look toward Clara filled with feigned reluctance, as though she did not want to speak but had no choice, explaining that she did not want to accuse anyone unfairly. Yet did he not find it odd that Clara went into the garden alone at 2 a.m. and knew exactly where to dig to find Liam? And Clara felt the blood in her veins turn to ice because she understood immediately what was happening, insisting stiffly that she had heard a sound and had already explained everything, while Serena nodded with a mask of sympathy that could not hide the coldness in her eyes, replying that of course she understood, but asking what kind of sound could possibly travel from the rose garden all the way to the servants' quarters at the far end of the corridor, pointing out that the mansion was very well soundproofed and that she herself slept on the second floor and had not heard a thing. And Marcus frowned because the question clearly struck a chord of doubt inside him, while panic rose in Clara's chest even as she forced herself to stay calm, saying she could not explain it and only knew that she had heard something and gone outside to check. As Serena sighed and lifted a hand to her eyes as if wiping away tears, telling Marcus that she did not want to believe this either, but asking if he had considered another possibility. And when Marcus asked what possibility in a voice that dropped to something dangerous, Serena looked at Clara with a perfectly crafted expression of anguish and suggested that perhaps Clara herself had buried Liam and then played the hero to earn his trust and secure her place in the family, mentioning that she had heard Clara was drowning in debt and might have wanted money or perhaps something more. And Clara felt as though she had been struck by lightning, stammering in disbelief and demanding to know if Serena was insane, insisting that she loved Liam, like her own child, and would never harm him, while Serena did not grow angry, but merely regarded her with false pity, and asked who could prove that, turning back to Marcus and urging him to think about who had constant access to the children, who knew the rose garden like the back of her hand, and who had a financial motive to do something so desperate. And when Marcus looked at Clara, she saw for the first time clear suspicion in his eyes, because a Mafia boss who had lived too long in a world of betrayal and deception could never trust easily. And Serena's words, however poisonous, carried their own cold logic. And when Marcus asked Clara in a voice no longer trembling but hard as steel to explain why she had been in the garden at 2 a.m. with a more convincing reason than hearing a sound, Clara wanted to scream and point at Serena and declare that she was the one who had buried Liam alive, but she had no proof and only instinct, which meant nothing in Marcus Antonelli's world, so she said she was telling the truth, her voice shaking but her gaze steady, that she did not know how to prove it, but would rather die than let Liam be harmed. And Marcus said nothing, only stared at her with an unreadable expression, a silence more terrifying than any accusation, while Serena stood beside him with the faintest curve to her lips that only Clara noticed, the smile of a victor, because Serena was winning, pushing Clara into the role of the suspect while she herself was the true murderer. And Clara, a poor maid burdened by crushing debt and with no one on her side, could only stand there helplessly as the trap tightened around her neck. Marcus did not arrest Clara, but he did not let her go either, ordering Viktor Petrov to take her back to the mansion and keep her there until the investigation was finished, and Clara found herself confined inside the same small room she had once considered paradise, the door not locked yet, 2 guards standing in the hallway, 24 hours a day. Every step she took watched, every phone call monitored, forbidden to see Sophia or enter any part of the mansion beyond her room and the kitchen. And Clara understood her situation clearly, because in Marcus Antonelli's world suspects were not brought before public courts, and if he came to believe she had harmed his son, she would vanish without a trace, like so many enemies of the Antonelli family before her. She could try to run, but run where when she had no money, no family, no one to turn to, and fleeing would only confirm Marcus's suspicions and make her a hunted woman to the ends of the earth, leaving her with only one way to survive, to uncover the truth and prove that Serena was the one who had buried Liam alive. Yet how could she investigate while under constant surveillance? So Clara began to observe and wait, noting the guards' schedule and realizing they changed shifts at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m, with about 5 minutes of confusion while information was exchanged, and also noticing that Serena usually left the mansion in the afternoons for spa visits or shopping, times when her room was left unguarded. And on the 3rd day of her confinement, Clara decided to act, pretending to go get water in the kitchen during the morning shift change and quickly slipping into the back garden, returning to the spot where she had dug Liam up to search for any remaining clues. And there she found it, a small brown medicine bottle lying beneath a nearby rosebush, hidden under fallen leaves, which Clara picked up and read the label to see it was a high-dose sedative, requiring a doctor's prescription. Exactly the drug the doctor had said was found in Liam's blood, and Clara hid the bottle in her pocket and returned to her room before anyone noticed she was gone, knowing that one bottle alone was not enough because Serena could claim anyone could have bought it, or accuse Clara of purchasing it herself and pretending to discover it, meaning Clara needed more, and that chance came on the 5th night, when Sophia slipped into Clara's room at midnight, opening the door softly and sliding in like a shadow, with eyes red from crying, and Clara held the girl and asked what was wrong, listening as Sophia said she had not been able to sleep since hearing Liam had been buried alive, that she was terrified and did not know whom to trust but knew Clara was not the one who did it, asking in a trembling voice whether Clara had harmed Liam, and Clara whispered that she would never do such a thing, and loved Sophia and Liam more than anyone in the world, after which Sophia fell silent for a moment before saying something that made Clara freeze, that she had heard Serena talking on the phone the night before in a strange language, not English, and calling herself by another name. And Clara tightened her grip on Sophia's hand and asked what name she remembered, and Sophia frowned in concentration and said it sounded like Natasha. Natasha something, and that the language sounded like the one in Russian films her mother used to watch when she was still alive, and Clara felt the pieces beginning to fit together, realizing Serena was not her real name, that she spoke Russian and had another identity no one knew about. And when Clara asked if Sophia had heard anything else, the girl nodded and said she heard Serena talking about a plan and about money, and saying that if everything had not gone wrong, she would already be a rich widow by now. And Clara felt her blood turn to ice because widow meant Serena had intended to kill Marcus too, and that Liam had only been the first step. And Clara held Sophia tighter as her thoughts spun, knowing she needed to learn more about Serena's true identity, and gather evidence that could not be denied and do it before Serena struck again or before Marcus decided that Clara herself was guilty. So she whispered to Sophia not to let Serena know she had shared any of this, to pretend everything was normal and to tell Clara immediately if she heard or saw anything else, asking if she could do that. And Sophia nodded with determination shining in her eyes, saying she would help for Liam and for her mother. And Clara kissed the girl's forehead, filled with gratitude and fear, because she now had a small ally in this fight, and also knew they were facing a cold-blooded killer, where one small mistake could cost them both their lives. On the 7th day of Clara's confinement, an unexpected visitor appeared at her door. Victor Petrov, Marcus Antonelli's right-hand man, a 50-year-old with silver hair and eyes sharp as blades, and Clara instinctively stepped back at the sight of him, every nerve warning her that this was a dangerous man. Yet Victor did not carry his usual threatening air. Instead, he glanced down the corridor to make sure no one was watching, then entered the room and closed the door behind him, saying he needed to speak with her and that she needed to listen carefully, leaving Clara confused as to why a man so fiercely loyal to Marcus would come to her in secret. And after studying her for a long moment, Victor finally said that he did not believe she was the one who buried Liam, words that stunned Clara, because they were the last she ever expected from him. And when she cautiously asked why, Victor replied that he had been watching her since the day she arrived, that he watched everyone in the mansion because it was his job, and that he knew how deeply she cared for the children, because no one could fake that kind of love, giving Clara a flicker of hope, though she remained guarded as she asked who he believed was responsible. Victor sat across from her, his expression grim. "I checked the security logs again," Victor said, his voice low. The cameras in the Rose Garden were manually disabled that night, using a master override code, a code that only Marcus and his wife possessed. She claimed it was a glitch, but now we know the truth, he continued, admitting that he had checked Serena's background when she first met Marcus. Her records were flawless, Victor said, his voice heavy with regret. Birth certificate, university degrees in France, tax records in Italy. They were perfect. Too perfect. He explained that at the time, her history seemed legitimate. But after Sophia mentioned the Russian language, he re-examined those old documents and realized they were masterfully forged by a professional syndicate fakes good enough to fool even him 5 years ago, which made Clara recall Sophia's words about Serena speaking Russian and calling herself Natasha, fitting disturbingly well with Victor's account. And when Clara pressed for more, Victor sighed and spoke of Victoria's car accident, confessing he had always felt something was wrong, that Victoria had been a careful driver with a well-maintained car, yet the brakes failed on a mountain road and she plunged into the ravine, ruled an accident by police, though he never believed it, sending a chill down Clara's spine as she asked if he thought Serena was involved, to which Victor nodded slowly, saying Serena appeared in Marcus's life only 3 months after Victoria's death, meeting him at a charity event and skillfully presenting herself as a gentle woman who understood his grief, marrying him a year later despite Victor's warnings that Marcus dismissed as paranoia. And at that point, Clara reached into her pocket and produced the sedative bottle she had found in the garden, asking if Victor recognized it, and as he examined it, His eyes darkened, identifying it as a high-dose sedative, tightly controlled, and asking where she had found it, and when Clara said it had been near where Liam was buried, and added Sophia's account of Serena speaking Russian and calling herself Natasha, Victor looked at her and for the first time allowed a faint smile, saying she was braver than he had thought, and that he would help her investigate, because he had resources she did not. Though they would have to be careful since Serena would not hesitate to act if she discovered them, and Clara nodded, knowing they were entering a deadly game with a cold-blooded killer, but also knowing she was no longer alone, because now she had Victor, she had Sophia, and she had an unbreakable resolve to expose the truth at any cost. For Liam, for Victoria, and for every victim Serena might have left behind along her blood-soaked path. 3 days after her conversation with Victor, Clara finally got the opportunity she had been waiting for, when Serena announced she would be going into New York for the day to meet with a lawyer about inheritance matters. A perfect excuse to be away from the mansion for several hours. And Clara knew this was her only chance, having observed long enough to know where Serena hid the key to her bedroom, a small key kept inside a jewelry box on the vanity. And the moment Serena's car disappeared beyond the gates, Clara moved, slipping past the guards by pretending to collect laundry, and then quickly heading to Serena's room on the second floor, her heart pounding like a war drum as she unlocked the door and stepped inside the luxurious bedroom heavy with expensive perfume, knowing she had little time as she searched carefully without leaving a trace, checking the wardrobe, beneath the bed, behind the framed artwork, finding nothing unusual until she remembered the drawer Serena always kept locked. She searched everywhere but found nothing, until she noticed a loose floorboard beneath the heavy vanity. Prying it open with a nail file, she found a cheap burner phone and a small notebook. Her hands trembling, she powered on the phone. It wasn't password protected. The gallery was full of photos, copies of different passports with Serena's face but different names: Natasha, Isabella, Camille, and photos of bank transfer documents related to insurance payouts from deceased husbands. Natasha Volkov from Russia, Isabella Moretti from Italy, Camille Dubois from France, and Maria Santos from Brazil, along with old photographs and carefully clipped newspaper articles. And as Clara read them, her blood turned to ice because they described mysterious fatal accidents in different countries. A wealthy businessman in France killed in a house fire, a landowner in Brazil poisoned to death, a banker in Italy killed in a yacht accident, and in every funeral photograph Clara recognized Serena's face, each time under a different identity, each time playing the role of the grieving widow. And Clara photographed everything with her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely keep it steady, realizing Serena, or rather Natasha Volkov, was a serial killer who had married at least 4 wealthy men, all of whom had died under suspicious circumstances, leaving their fortunes to the widow. And now Marcus Antonelli was her next target, after which Clara hurriedly put everything back exactly as she found it and left the room, running to her own room to lock the door and send all the images to Victor, who responded immediately, saying he would verify the information through his international contacts. And only 2 hours later, Victor called back with a tense voice, confirming that everything matched, that Natasha Volkov was a con artist, wanted in multiple countries for fraud and suspected murder, having changed identities at least 4 times and vanished after each case before police could catch her. And Clara knew she could not wait any longer, so she sent an anonymous email to Detective James Thornton, who was investigating Liam's burial, attaching all the images and information she had gathered, aware it was dangerous but seeing no other choice. And just minutes after sending the email, Clara's phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number, which she opened and felt her blood freeze as it read that she should not have been curious because curiosity killed the cat. And Clara looked around the room with the chilling sense that someone was watching her from the shadows. Realizing Serena knew somehow that Clara was investigating, and the phone buzzed again with a second message asking whether she thought the police could save her, reminding her she was living in a Mafia house where no one came or went without notice, and that Serena knew exactly what Clara had just sent, and to whom. And Clara's hands trembled as she tried to erase her email history, though she knew it was far too late. And then a third message appeared that made her want to scream in terror, saying that tonight one of them would not wake up and that Serena was certain it would not be her. Clara knew she had no time left. Serena knew she had been exposed and would not sit still waiting to be arrested, so Clara ran to Marcus's office, ignoring the ban, ignoring the guards trying to stop her, bursting through the door and shouting that she had proof of who had buried Liam alive. And Marcus rose from behind his desk with a face carved from ice while Victor stood beside him, having arrived a step earlier, demanding to know what she was doing there in a voice heavy with threat. And Clara, breathless, said she knew who had harmed his son and that she had evidence. handing Marcus her phone and showing him the photographs of forged passports, the articles about mysterious deaths, and Serena's true identity. And as Marcus scrolled through the images, his expression shifted from suspicion to horror and then to complete collapse. Each photograph and headline adding another crushing weight to his broad shoulders, until he whispered in a trembling voice she had never heard before that it could not be, that Victoria, his wife, had been murdered. And Victor gravely confirmed that he had verified everything through international contacts, that Natasha Volkov was a professional con artist who had done the same in France, Italy, and Brazil, that all previous husbands had died under suspicious circumstances, and she had inherited everything, and that Victoria's accident matched her methods. And Marcus stood frozen as the phone slipped from his hand to the floor, the most powerful mafia boss in New York, now looking like a man who had lost everything, realizing he had brought his wife's killer into his home, slept beside her, allowed her near his children, and he roared that he would kill her with his own hands, eyes blazing with madness. But Clara suddenly understood that Serena knew the evidence had been sent, that everything was about to unravel, and that Serena would not run without finishing what she had started. So Clara screamed that Liam was still in the hospital, that he was the only witness, and if he woke and spoke, and before she could finish, Marcus was already charging out with Victor and the guards behind him. Yet Clara felt they would be too late, because Serena had the advantage of time and could already be at the hospital while Clara had been running to Marcus's office. So Clara ran to the gate and stopped a guard's car, forcing the driver to take her by the fastest route to the hospital, though she could not drive herself. And 15 minutes later, she burst into the hospital like a storm, racing through the lobby, knocking over a nurse without stopping to apologize, running up to the 3rd floor where Liam's room was. As she turned the corner, she saw the 2 bodyguards walking away toward the nurse's station, likely dismissed by Serena on a false errand. Her heart hammered as if it would explode. She neared the room, saw the door ajar, and through the gap she saw Serena standing beside Liam's bed with a syringe in her hand poised to inject it into his IV line. And Clara did not think. She lunged into the room, screaming for her to stop, and Serena spun around, her perfect face twisting with rage as the mask fell away to reveal the monster beneath, hissing that Clara had ruined everything, and Clara rushed her and grabbed the arm holding the syringe, as they struggled and slammed into the bed, making the monitors shriek. Serena stronger than Clara expected, shoving her to the floor and straddling her, hands crushing Clara's throat until she could not breathe, and the world began to dim, Clara groping desperately until her fingers closed around cold metal, a medical tray, which she swung with all the strength she had into Serena's head, making Serena scream and release her. Clara rolling away, coughing and gasping for air, but Serena already rising with blood on her forehead and madness in her eyes, grabbing the syringe again and advancing toward Liam's bed, screaming that the boy would die, and then Clara would follow, boasting that she had done this many times and never failed, and Clara lunged again, seizing Serena's leg and pulling her down hard so the syringe flew away. The 2 women grappling on the hospital floor, scratching and punching as blood and sweat mixed, Clara feeling Serena's nails tear at her face, yet refusing to let go because she could not allow Serena near Liam and would rather die than let that happen, the sound of shouting and running, feet echoing in the hallway as hospital security rushed toward them. But Serena did not stop, twisting and reaching for the syringe, lying a few steps away, Clara trying to block her but failing as Serena snatched it and turned back with eyes blazing insanity, raising the syringe ready to strike. And then a small voice spoke, weak but clear, freezing both women in place. Liam lay on the hospital bed, clear blue eyes opening for the first time after days in a coma, and as he saw Serena holding the syringe, saw Clara bleeding on the floor, the memories of that horrific night rushed back like a flood. "She did it," Liam whispered, his voice hoarse and trembling. "She put me in the box. I saw her mix the medicine into the milk. I saw everything." And Serena froze as the syringe slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor, echoing in the sudden silence of the room. For the first time, the perfectly controlled face she always wore cracked into real panic. "No," Serena stammered as she stepped back. "He does not know anything. He is delirious." But Liam continued, his voice growing stronger despite the fear. "She made me drink the milk. Then everything went dark. I woke up in the box. I could not breathe. I called out, but no one heard me. I was scared." Tears streamed down his face as the terrible memories spilled out. "I thought I was going to die. Then I heard Clara calling my name. She saved me." And at that moment the door burst open as hospital security rushed in with Detective James Thornton and 2 officers, taking in the scene of Serena standing in madness, Clara bloodied on the floor, and Liam crying on the bed. "Arrest her," Thornton ordered. "Arrest her now." And the officers lunged forward, wrenching Serena's arms behind her back as she screamed curses in Russian and fought in vain, the handcuffs snapping shut with a cold click, while Clara struggled to rise, dizzy from blood loss and shock, crawling to Liam's bedside and pulling him into her arms as tears poured down her bruised face. "I am here now," Clara whispered, choking back sobs. "You are safe. I will never let anyone hurt you again." And Liam clung to her as if she were the only lifeline in the world, crying that he was so afraid of her, and Clara kissed his curls and promised that Serena would never touch him again. Then footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Marcus appeared in the doorway with Victor and the guards behind him, the Mafia boss freezing as he took in the sight of the poor maid he had doubted now wounded and holding his son, the wife he had trusted in handcuffs, and his small boy clinging to Clara, as if she alone could protect him. Marcus stepped inside, his legs heavy as stone, and when the police led Serena past, she paused and glared at Clara with naked hatred, the mask gone to reveal the monster beneath as she hissed that this was not a happy ending, that Clara Bennett had no idea what she was involved in, that she was not the only one and others would come, that Clara would regret destroying her life. And though the police dragged Serena away, the threat lingered in the air. Yet Clara was not afraid, because she had faced the darkness and won. She had saved Liam twice, and whatever came she would keep fighting for Liam, for Sophia, for the small family she had found in the shadows of the Mafia world. And Marcus knelt beside the bed, placing a hand on Clara's shoulder and meeting her eyes without apology or thanks, only with emotions too deep to name. And in that moment Clara understood that everything between them had changed forever. In the weeks that followed, the truth about the death of Victoria Antonelli was finally laid bare, as Detective Thornton, working alongside an international task force, uncovered evidence that could no longer be denied, proving that Serena, or rather Natasha Volkov, had been watching the Antonelli family for months before Victoria died and had hired a mechanic to sabotage the braking system of the car Victoria regularly drove, turning what had seemed like a tragic accident on a winding mountain road into a meticulously planned murder. And when Victor presented this evidence to Marcus in his office, the most powerful Mafia boss in New York collapsed completely, sitting there with his broad shoulders trembling, as for the first time in more than 18 years. Since the day his father was murdered, Marcus Antonelli cried, tears streaming down his angular face without any attempt to hide them, crying for Victoria, the wife he had loved but failed to protect, crying for Liam, the son who had nearly died because of his blindness, crying for Sophia, the little girl who had lived under the same roof as her mother's killer for 2 long years, and crying for himself, the man who had unknowingly invited the wolf into his home, while Clara stood quietly in the doorway watching, saying nothing as she stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, a small gesture filled with meaning, as if to tell him he was not alone, that she was there, that everything would be all right. And Marcus clutched her hand as if it were the last rope keeping him from falling into the abyss. Then 3 months later, the trial of Natasha Volkov began in federal court in New York, lasting 2 weeks and featuring hundreds of pieces of evidence from multiple countries, with Liam bravely taking the stand, the 6-year-old boy sitting in the witness chair and recounting the terrifying night in the kitchen and the suffocating hours inside the wooden box beneath the ground, his voice trembling but unyielding as the courtroom listened in complete silence. And Clara also testified, telling everything from the night she heard the sounds in the rose garden to the violent struggle in the hospital room, meeting Natasha's eyes without flinching despite the hatred still burning there. And the jury needed only 2 hours to return a verdict of guilty on all counts, sentencing Natasha Volkov to life in prison without parole for premeditated murder, attempted murder, fraud, and identity theft, with extradition to France, Italy, and Brazil to face additional charges related to the deaths of her previous husbands. And as she was led from the courtroom, Natasha turned back to look at Clara one last time. But Clara was no longer afraid, having faced the darkness, and won, having protected the children she loved, knowing that justice had finally been served. And 6 months after the trial, the Antonelli mansion slowly came back to life, Sophia no longer the cold and distant girl she once was, but laughing more, talking more, calling Clara simply Clara, treating her with the warmth and respect reserved for a mother figure instead of addressing her as a servant, while Liam made a full physical recovery despite still waking from nightmares on some nights when Clara would be there to hold him and sing until he fell asleep again. And one evening Marcus summoned Clara to his office and handed her a check large enough to pay off the nearly $200,000 debt and buy a house anywhere she wished, only for Clara to look at the check and then at Marcus and gently but firmly refuse, saying she did not do what she did for money, that she had saved Liam twice and deserved far more, but she shook her head and said she had acted out of love for Liam and Sophia as if they were her own children, that she had lost her parents and everything else but had found what she thought was gone forever in that house, looking straight into Marcus's eyes and telling him she did not need money, only the chance to stay with the children and have a family. And Marcus looked at her for a long time as something shifted in his dark eyes, before telling her to stay, not as a maid but as a member of the family, as part of their lives. And Clara smiled with tears shimmering in her eyes and nodded. And 1 year later, the rose garden of the Antonelli estate bloomed more beautifully than ever, red and white roses glowing under the spring sun and covering what had once been a burial ground for darkness. As Clara stood among the flowers, watching Sophia and Liam play on the green lawn, their laughter filling the air with a sound she once believed she would never hear in that house, while Marcus joined her, no longer distant or cold, standing shoulder to shoulder as they watched the children, telling her that a year earlier he had believed power and money were everything and that he could control it all, only to realize he had been wrong. And when Clara asked what he believed now, he looked at her with a warmth she had never seen before, and said he now knew the most precious things could not be bought, that true family, genuine love, and people willing to sacrifice for one another were what mattered most, telling her she was an irreplaceable part of that. And Clara smiled as happy tears rolled down her cheeks, having come so far from the girl who slept in her car and collapsed on a sidewalk unseen, to the woman standing here today, loved, needed, and called family, as Liam ran over and grabbed her hand, beaming up at her and inviting her to see the flowers they had planted for her, with Sophia taking her other hand and proudly saying she had planted white roses because Clara liked white, and the children pulled her toward the corner of the garden where new flowers bloomed, Marcus following behind with his gaze fixed on the woman who had changed his life, as life flourished where darkness had once been buried. And the story of Clara Bennett reminds us that no matter how deeply life may push us into despair, there is always light at the end of the tunnel, that kindness and courage can overcome darkness, that family is not only about blood, but about those willing to sacrifice for one another, and that genuine love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. And dear friends, if this story touched your hearts, please subscribe to our channel, like and share this video so more people can listen to these emotional stories each day. Let us know how you feel about Clara's story and whether it connects with your own life. Leave a comment from the depths of your heart, because we read every single one. Thank you for watching. Take care. Wishing you good health, peace, and happiness every day. Goodbye, and see you again in our next video.